Okay, I think all the major pieces are put together. I had to kind of work on that a little bit with some more dope. It wasn't sticking down good, but not my best job, but I think it'll be functional. So that's the wing. Stabilizer, fin, pylon. There's sanded those grooves. Make a couple of pieces for the bottom of the pylon to attach to the fuselage. The tapered shaft. So really just using a dowel rod here and some sandpaper to sand a round groove into this 1/4 inch soft balsa. So that way it'll fit around that. So kind of see this is kind of how this fits in there. So with that groove, it holds it pretty good. It's tapered, so you can start getting towards the bigger end. It starts to fit a little tighter. But what I'm going to do, and see how it's holding it in there with that groove cut. But what I'll do before I actually glue this in place, plus I also need to do this trimming around here to get that all to fit, look nice. But we'll be able to slide this back and forth to get the CG close without having to add too much weight. So kind of see how that turns out. But once I get this trimmed down, what I'm going to do next is mount the timer and the servo, get the electronic speed control in here, and get it all set up. And then I've got these little plywood motor mounts. Get that kind of glued on, and we're getting pretty close. Okay, now it's time to start putting the electronics together. So need all of this to fit into this pod, and got the motor mount glued together. But right now I've got the soldering iron heating up, but we're going to put bullet connectors here from the motor to the speed controller. And for this, I'm using a Talon 15 from Castle Creations. It's a little pricier than some of the cheaper ones, but I like it because it's like super small. So on this plane, I'm trying to go for lightweight and performance. So I spent a little extra on the Castle Creations one. Then we've got to connect the battery also. So I have these Dean's micro plugs to fit into that. And here's one of the batteries that I use on my E36 models. The timer is going to be the BMK E36 RDT with built-in RDT. And also need to connect or solder on some connections there. Then for the servo, I've got this, I got it off eBay. It's like a 1.7 gram, I believe, servo. It's a lot smaller than the other ones I've used. Haven't used this one yet, so hopefully this will work fine. If not, I've got some other spares that'll work. So anyhow, so the next part of this video is going to be just showing kind of how I solder everything together. It's just one of those skills that's really good to have. Been doing it for years. So I'll kind of get the camera set up and zoom in, and we'll solder some of the connections on and show you how I do that. So here's the BMK E36 timer. It's a little bitty thing. It's not quite as easy to program as like the one that you get from Texas Timers, but it's considerably smaller. The Texas Timer ones has a rotary switch where you set the time. This one, you have to push in the button, plug it in, it goes into program mode, and then you set the motor run time and the DT time like that. So it's a little more finicky, but you can just see how small it is. I put just like a regular single edge razor blade there to get the scale. But when you get the thing, it comes with two sets of connectors, these straight ones and these angled ones. I'm going to use the angled ones. Get these out of the way. So the trick here is just kind of to solder these guys on. This is where the electronic speed control hooks up to it. And then on the other side is the servo. So let me kind of get those into the holes here. And so you can see these little teeny tiny pads I'm going to have to solder to. So this is kind of the delicate part. And it's a little tough to do, but let's see if I can kind of show it. So I have my fine tip soldering iron here. So you put a little bit of solder on the tip. Make sure it's nice and clean. And like I said, this is a tricky thing to do. At least it is for me. Okay, got that one. Yeah, that seems solid. So that's the servo. Anyway, electronic speed control. Then this side's the servo. But that's signal plus and minus. So when you hook in the speed controls and the servo, you got to make sure you got the orientation right on your wiring. So I'm going to get this other one done, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Okay, the next part is to solder up the connectors onto the motor, and I'm using these little bullet connectors. Just got them off eBay. So what I do here is these are already pre-tinned on the motor as they come from Cobra. I may trim that one back because it's got some extra there, but I want to put some solder in each end of these, so I kind of prep them a little bit. So the way I do that is take it apart, and I've got, handy dandy clothespins that every modeler has. And what I'm going to do is put some solder inside of, make sure you got the right end. That's the bullet, so that's the end where the wire goes. Then I just kind of try to add a drop of solder there. Then the other one, this is the one that you have to kind of be careful you get the right end. That's the end where the connector goes. This is the end where the wire goes. Make sure you got the right end. There we go. And the trick with soldering is making sure that you put the iron on the part so it gets hot, so the solder will go in there. Otherwise, it'll just stick to the iron. Here you can even put it on the side, maybe. Yeah, there you go. Plus, you need a little bit of solder on the tip of the iron, too, to help conduct that heat. So I'm going to finish up the rest of those, and then I'll show you kind of how I put them on the wires themselves. Okay, so everything's been kind of prepped. I like to put the the bullet connector part, the male part, on the motor itself. Then I use a torch, a little propane torch for this part, because it seems just to work better if I can heat this part up and then just push it onto the wire. So kind of like this. Let's get this guy going. I don't know if you saw that, it kind of happened fast, but I heated that connector up right there and then just pushed it on. It melts the solder. Grab the next one. Hold it still, and it's on. I'm going to trim that wire a little bit on this one. Okay, there you go. So now what I'll do is put some heat shrink on that, and then we'll clean them up. The heat shrink just slides right over. Right to where the other end connects to it. I'm using my handy dandy Harbor Freight heat gun. Nice and neat. Okay, so the other end of this goes to the electronic speed controller. 3 wires there. So I'm going to solder on the barrel parts of those bullet connectors. I may just go ahead and leave these wires long because the motor will be mounted, up here. Then I've got to, there's be a hole here for the wires to go through, but I'm going to be, depending on where I end up with the timer, I may be, putting it back here. So it's kind of hollow inside of there. I don't think it's going to be that big a deal. I'll have plenty of space to kind of stuff the wires. I'm going to leave them long for now. Any weight savings from trimming these wires back an inch or two is be minimal anyway. So anyhow, so that's how we're going to do that. So it's kind of the same program here. Then on these, I go right up to the edge with the heat shrink to cover up all that conductive, because you don't want things shorting out underneath inside of there. So right up. There's always that one that tries to be difficult. I have a little piece of solder there. Right up to the end. Then they'll just plug right into the motor like this. Just make a nice, neat. Start out with black to black, red to red, white to yellow on the motor. But once we check rotation, we may have to swap one of these, swap two of these to get the rotation in the right direction. But anyhow, so that's how I do that. Now we work on the battery end of it. So for the battery, I'm using these Dean's micro plugs. And all my batteries for the E36 planes have them like this, where the one sticking out is the positive and the negative is the female part of that. So now I need to match up with that, which means that I need to go opposite on what's on the speed controller. So but the first thing to do is to kind of prep this a little bit. So I've got it sitting there. I may actually put it in a clothespin, just kind of help hold it. And I'm put a little bit of solder on each of these posts. And this is another one of these kind of tricky little connectors to do, but oh, my soldering iron's unplugged. Okay, I'm back. Had to unplug the soldering iron to use the heat gun. I forgot to plug it back in. So usually what I do before I start these is I'll put some solder on the tip. And I've got one of those copper Brillo pad tip cleaner kind of things. Add a little bit to the tip. Then you just put it down against the pin there. Add a little glob of solder. It's very tiny and delicate. There we go. Let me work on this other one a little bit here. You want it to flow on there nice. Okay. Like I said, don't forget to put the heat shrink on your wires before you make all this permanent. Well, it's not even permanent, it's solder joint, so you could take it apart, but it makes it a pain in the butt. I've done that many times, having to go back. Okay, so now we want the positive on the socket side, the female side, whatever you want to call it. So this is another one of these. Takes really more hands than you got, but kind of looking for a nice shiny solder joint. Okay, took a few, but I finally got it. Wow, what a finicky little mess. Okay, let's make sure they're, yeah, it's on there good. Okay, the other thing to do is just check in between, make sure you don't have any bridges in between so you're not shorting stuff out. Let that cool for a minute, then I'll bring up the heat shrink and we'll heat shrink it. Okay, let's see how well I did here. Got the motor screwed down to a board here. Here's the electronic speed control. Got it hooked up to the timer. Make sure you got the negative wire on the bottom, signal wire on top. And we've got the little servo here, just kind of attached it to a clothespin so it doesn't flop over. So let's hook up the power and see what happens. Okay, we got some noises. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to unplug it, bind it to the RDT. So to do that, you hold down the button while you plug in the battery, Then you let go of the button and you push the remote button on the RDT. So that's blinking, and then, okay, so now it should be programmed to this remote, which is good. That's the one I use for my other E36 plane. So let's, I guess let's see what happens. Now that the RDT is going, I can just push the button to turn the motor off. So here we go. Push the arm. Okay, it should be ready to go. Then see if the motor fires. Oh, also saw the servo go. So I haven't set any times on it yet, so this is just whatever the default is. I interrupted the motor run with the RDT, so that's what happened there. Reset that. So it looks like it's working. Arm it again. Let's try it just one more time. Let's see how long the motor runs. Yeah, it looks like 3 seconds. Let's see how long the... Did it already go? Wasn't watching. I'm going to hit the RDT button. There it goes. Then you push this button to reset the DT servo. So, looks like it's working. So now that we've got a working system, now we need to fit it into the plane. So that'll be the next bit. Okay, there's not a lot of details on the plans on how to kind of put your timer and battery and everything. I kind of looked at the videos that Josh had and kind of how he did it, but this is what I came up with. So here's my electronic speed controller. Of course, it'll be in there, but these wires will come out of this hole. And I've just, making little bits out of some thin plywood, kind of reinforce that. I've also added kind of a little bulkhead inside of there to give that some support. But this is how I'm going to mount this timer. This is kind of what I did on my Manito project. But you kind of fish the wires through, and it's a little difficult. I had some tweezers, kind of reminds me of working on a hollow body electric guitar, feeding the wires through and all that kind of jazz. But hook everything up here. So yeah, kind of hook that up. Make sure you get the wires oriented properly. The ground wire is on the bottom. So this will go in like that. And then I'm going to make a little cover that kind of goes right there, and that'll help hold that in. And actually those connectors, the servo connectors, will actually hold it in. I don't even think I'll need to add screws to that to hold it in. So I'll make another little plate there. This is kind of what I did on the servo mount. It's kind of fabricated it out of balsa and ply. Servo gets mounted in like that, and then it'll be, I wanted to have it removable, of course, because if I glue it in like that, then first thing will happen is the servo will fail. So that's kind of how that goes. I'll come back after I kind of have that finished. I still need to make the a little mouse trap lever for the DT, and I'll kind of show you how I do that too. Okay, so I got the little hatch door made here, the timer retainer, covered it in tissue, so that's going to go right there, and I'll put some screws in there, but that'll hold the timer in. For this little mechanism for the for the DT servo, you just cut a small piece of the tubing that Josh supplies with the kit, And that just cuts with a razor blade. You can just roll that back and forth with this razor blade to cut it. So now I need to kind of bend it this way, and it'll go underneath that arm. So I found the easiest way to get a nice bend on these is to use, he actually supplied a pretty good length of aluminum tubing. Go ahead and put that tubing over the rest of that music wire, and I'm wanting to bend it that way. So make it so it's not a real sloppy kind of hinge or whatever. Use that piece of tube right up against it, and then you just, that'll make a nice, neat bend right up to the edge of that aluminum tubing. So now I got to figure out how to attach that. Usually what I use is, I use some metal. I was at, oh, hang on, let me get it. I think it was just at Walmart, maybe Hobby Lobby, I don't know, but I bought one of these metal signs, posted private property. I just picked the one that was the cheapest. Oh, it might have been at, I think it was at Lowe's actually. And so what I used, you can see where I've been trimming pieces off of it. It'll just cut with scissors. But now what I'm going to do is bend this over and make like a little bracket to screw onto that to hold this hinge or the DT. So that'll go attached to there like that. So I have to trim that back, but then when the servo moves, this is hooked onto your line going back to your stabilizer, and that will trip the DT. So kind of all the little finicky bits, but I'll show you kind of how it ends up. So this is how it ended up. Everything kind of hooked up and everything plugged in. So let's give it a little smoke fest dry run here and see what happens. I still need to figure out a way to secure the battery in there. I bought some of these Velcro, little Velcro straps. I think they're for like wires and stuff. I may end up hot gluing that in there so I can secure the battery in. But let's plug it in and see what happens here. So I need to figure out how I want to do the battery. We'll just put it there for now. Okay. So, armed. Very good. I'll go ahead and hit the RDT. Watch the servo. Then reset the servo. So this is where the DT line will be hooked up. So whenever that releases, it lets it go. So looks good. And figure out how I'm going to do this battery. That's how I ended up. Got the little strap glued in there, hot glued in there, so it's securing the battery. So it keeps it from going back and forth that way, and then there's that bulkhead in there to keep it from bouncing up and down. So it's pretty secure in there. Now the electronic speed controller is kind of in this area. It's pretty lightweight. I don't think it'll move around too much. It'll probably settle in, find its own spot, but here we go. Make sure it all's still working. Need to tighten down that a little bit. Works good. Now for the tail feathers, figure that part out and get everything lined up.